Session, what did you make of it?
Very positive one for the start of the week, as you mentioned, really continuing on from those positive, that positive momentum last week. And this morning we just continued those positive leads from overseas markets, and we did actually manage to track relatively sideways for most of the day, which was certainly a positive momentum. There wasn't too much volatility on the market today, despite seeing a lot of volatility recently entering the market. We did actually have very light volumes going through today, only about $3 billion in the end, and we were also very quiet in terms of economic data. So I do think that reflects a little bit of caution from investors, potentially investors sitting on the sidelines a little bit ahead of some of the other economic data that we have out later this week, particularly coming out of China. So I certainly think that was reflected on the market today, but as you said, really those materials and financial sector driving the market, investors still finding value in a lot of those major banks. And of course, looking at that materials sector, we did see most stocks performing quite strongly, although we did see some of those gold stocks, the likes of Newcrest Mining and Resolute Mining, coming under a little bit of pressure today. But overall, as you said, a very positive start to the session, and hoping that we will be able to continue this momentum for the rest of the week.
Thoughts on the outlook for our market? Do we continue to move higher?
James, I do certainly think we can continue to move higher, but I do think investors will be waiting for a lot of this economic data coming out of China, particularly after we have been seeing some recent soft data out, and there's been a lot of concern about a potential slowdown over there. So, of course, tomorrow we do know that we have quite a bit out. We have industrial production, that fixed asset investment, retail sales, but of course the big one will be that GDP number, which is coming out. That will obviously be closely watched, particularly to see whether they can maintain that growth at about 7.5%, although I think there is an expectation we might actually see a slowdown to about 7.2%. But I think a lot of those numbers coming out will certainly provide a bit of a drive for the market, particularly in terms of that material space. So I think if some of those numbers do come out positively, that will potentially continue to lead our market higher. I do think certainly in the short term there is still a bit of concern about this volatility. There are still a number of factors weighing on global markets, particularly over in Europe, that recession, a lot of concern around there, and of course coming out of the US as well, a lot of concern about this slowdown in global growth. So I think there are still a number of factors potentially in the short term that could potentially weigh. We might continue to see a little bit of this volatility, but overall I think in the long run we certainly will continue to see the market ticking up.
Today in 10 and Fairfax on the back of speculation of a potential merger.
James, that's exactly right. So certainly seeing the share price in both of those stocks bouncing. Last week, of course, we heard out from 10, their profit announcement for the full year, and that actually came through a little bit weaker, but it was relatively expected. We really know that 10 has been under a lot of pressure in terms of a very challenging advertising market, and of course those ratings, which really do continue to come under pressure and really adding pressure on a lot of their earnings and their revenues. So I think the outlook for 10 has always been a bit challenging, and investors certainly cautious, but we have actually seen a bit of a share price rise since we saw that full year result coming out last week, potentially off the back of a better outlook coming into FY15. The company is expecting that they will start to get some modest improvement, modest growth coming into the next year, also off the back of some announcements in terms of new programming as well, which certainly helped. But I think off the back of that outlook, and certainly potentially a takeover price being priced in, premium being priced into that share price, we have seen a bit of a bounce in that share price. So certainly will be an interesting one, obviously to speculation at this stage, but certainly seeing investors reacting to both of those stocks today.